Morning everyone, I'm Geoff Adams, hydrologist at eWater, and with me I also have Juanita Moolman, senior hydrologist. A webcast, Introduction to Functions for Expanding Source. Today we'll be talking about management, including improvements which have just come out on the last release, defining date ranges, commenting functions, time of evaluation, and the ability to add in custom model validation rules. If you have any questions during the webcast, please type in the Go to Webinar question pane on the right. And we will. Thank you for joining us, and I'll now hand over to Juanita to start the webinar.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Geoff. So what are functions in source? Well, we use functions in source to allow control the behavior of components within a model via an arithmetic expression or an equation. And functions are generally applied as an alternative to a time series or a single value. So where do you use functions in source? You use functions wherever you see the function editor option. As a few examples, on the inflow node, there is a button that allows you to access the function editor and type in a function. On the minimum flow requirement node, there is also a function editor option. On the supply point, there is a function editor option. And on the storage node, you can use a function to assign rainfall or evaporation on the storage node. That will allow you to provide a factor on your rainfall or your evaporation. Another point is you can use the function editor to trigger a rule curve on a minimum flow requirement node downstream of a storage node. So in this example, the storage function that is being used is the function trigger function, and trigger function accesses the storage volume. And for example, if the trigger value is at 1680, if the volume in the storage is at 1680, and it is January, then 227 megalitres per day of water will be requested to the storage. How do we manage functions in source? Functions in source are managed through the function manager. And the function manager allows one to open and collapse the functions that are in the manager, and from that you can see the usage. So in this example, is being used is at minimum flow requirement node number 133. The function editor can also be accessed through the function manager and is opened through the pencil, which then opens the function editor and allows one access to the function storage volume which is being used. So I will now show you an example of creating and using some functions in source. So in my model, I want to check how often the level of a storage goes below a target storage level, in this case 0.5 meters. And what I want is, as soon as this is more than 5% of the time that the model is running, more than 5% of the time of the run, then the model should give an error. I have a storage, and I will open the function manager, and there is the list of existing functions that I have already created in this model, and also some built-in functions that source provides for you to use. We can use, for example, we can access the day of the year, the number of days in the current month. We can find out what the current day is in the model run. And an example of expanding all the functions and then collapsing them all again as well. If I want to edit any of these functions, I use the Edit Functions button, the pencil, which opens the function editor. I have 4 functions created and 1 variable. The first thing that I'm wanting to do is I want to access the storage level inside my model, and I do that using a model variable. If I click on the variable $var store level, a model variable will open up all the components of the model and the recorders that are available for those models. So I have chosen storage level as the value for my variable. And in my example, I have set it up so that if storage level minus 0.5 goes negative, is less than 0, I will increment the value of storage level. So that gives me a counter to count the number of times the storage level goes below 0.5. And can then convert that to a percent if it is the last day in the run, the last month in the run. So here using built-in functions now.month, now.day to count which day of the run I'm in. And if it is the last day, which is end.day, end.month is the 12th month, and end.year will be the final year of the run, then I will divide the storage level count by the number of values in the run, the total number of days in the run, and convert that to a percent. And I have added a note to tell myself what is happening in this function. So the note is telling me that this function calculates at the end of the run. Notes are added using the I button to add or edit a note. You'll see there's a variable in here called count. So this is just another incrementer which is counting the number of days in the run. And then finally, I can do a check to see if I have exceeded the 5% cutoff in my model run. So here I have included the function for storage level, which I had typed out before, and said if that is more than 5% of the total number of days I know is 4,018, then I can divide by 0. A divide by 0 will allow the model to crash. And at the same time, though, there will be a recorded value for what has happened on that day. You'll notice that at the top I have a line that I have commented out. So you can comment out lines in functions using the backslash and a star on either side of the function. And that will comment out variables and function values. So for the first run of this model, I'm going to do a very simple run and remove these comments. And then I will comment out the test, which causes the model to crash if there is more than 5% below target level. And so the function that I have created here just says that if percent is more than 5, then it will crash at the end of the run. So percent evaluates at the end, on the final day of my whole run. And so in this example, this will give me the total number of times that I have exceeded my limit, my 0.5 meter target. So now that we have set that up, we can talk about running functions. Functions are accessed in the project hierarchy under miscellaneous. You can record any functions that you're interested in. I have switched on storage to dry again. I will run my model, and there was a error at the end of the model. If I open the log reporter, I see that I had put info onto my percent function, which tells me that it's calculating at the end of the run. And it also tells me that the function storage to dry has evaluated to no values. Open the results manager. Even though the model hasn't completed successfully because I purposefully made it crash, that is the value of the storage level across time, and there were below this value there is 0.5 is across there, and this is the increment showing how many times the 5.5 meters had been exceeded or had gone below, had not been, which is 199 times. And at that point, we had reached 5% of the total run period, and so the model ended. Returning to the function editor, if you're not sure whether your function has been input correctly, you can use the parser to input a value. If I input the value 1 in count and I update and pass, count started off with the initial value of 0. Adding 1 to that should give me a value of 1. So 1 plus 0 will give me a value of 1. Adding another 1 to that should give me a value of 2. So now I know that my function is evaluating correctly. So now that I have taken you through a little small introduction of what is inside the function manager. We've had a look at the function manager itself. We've had a look at the model variable type. We've had a look at recursive functions, at some of the inbuilt functions, the parser, the ability to comment out parts of what is in a function, the ability to add some notes. We've seen that errors can be useful in running a model with functions, and we've also seen how to record functions. So next I will just very briefly show you some of the different types of variables that can be used inside the functions in source. So moving back to my source model, and opening the function editor again, I have a folder. In functions, you can create folders to group together similar functions or variables. So I've created a folder where I've put the variable types that I will be using as an example. Time series type is probably the simplest function type. Variable type, sorry, where one can load a time series into, for example, an inflow node, which is what I have done here. The piecewise linear variable type allows you to create a lookup table, and one can then use, for example, in this one I have years, and for each year there is an expected annual demand for water, and the lookup table will then reference, using the inbuilt function now.year, will reference the year and then check, depending on which year it is, it will take a value from the right-hand side of this table. That's the piecewise linear function. A pattern variable inputs a pattern, and then internally source will measure with, depending on which month it is in this example, and use the required value from the right-hand side of the table. The bilinear variable is a variable that allows you to enter an array of numbers. So in this example, I am modeling the cost of water. So at the top, which is my x-axis, I have the volume of water, and I have years on the y-axis, which references the year, the y-axis, and internally we have the cost per megaliter. So if I am requiring 50 megaliters of water in 1913, the cost will be $580. So that is just a quick overview of some of the variable types that are available inside Source. And now I will hand back to Geoff, who can take you through some of the more complex parts of what's available to us in functions in Source.
Thank you, Juanita. So functions are very powerful, but they need to be implemented carefully because they can create errors if you are not careful. So we've recently introduced a new tool which helps you avoid errors, which I'll demonstrate in this example model. I thank the NDVA for permission to use this model to demonstrate some of the new functionality with functions. So this model appears quite simple. It's only got a few nodes, a few links, but when you delve down into it, it's quite powerful. You start to see there are a lot of functions in this model over on the left. So I'm in the function, this is a screenshot of the function manager, and you can see that there's a lot of functions there. This is where the new functionality comes in. Up the top, you can see there's a little two new icons, show function evaluation tree, where the mouse is now looking or pointing to. So we'll look into what show function evaluation tree tells us. You can also get to function evaluation tree by right-clicking in the tree. I apologise for the quality of this screenshot. It's compliments of my phone. So we've right-clicked the function, and now we see what the function Hume 2 years ago accesses. It accesses two inbuilt functions from Source, the now.day and now.month functions, which Juanita used earlier, and it also uses two model variables, which are defined. So we now know that this function is dependent on these two model variables. And we can see that on the right, this is a fairly simple function, and so the new functionality is not that useful in this particular case. However, if you get a more complex function, it then becomes very handy. So here we've got another function, Spill New South Wales. You can see at the top, in the function definition, there's some notes there to help people understand what the function's doing, which is very good practice to assist other people coming on board. And we've got a reasonably simple function, we think. We'll now see that the function is actually a little bit more complex than meets the eye. And for that, I'm going to be risk coming out to here. And this is going to be fun. I've got some, I'm going to have to look up at the other screen. I can't see what I need to see here. So, excuse me, I'm having to look at a different monitor, which is a bit far away, and the mouse is a little bit difficult to see on this one. So I right-click and go to the function evaluation tree, and we start to see all of the functions which this function depends on. So all of these functions over here in the left pane and model variables, they all affect the outcome of this apparently simple function. So the model evaluation tree is very powerful, you can see, to help you understand the behavior of your function. So this is actually a genuine function from a model. And so you can see that if you were trying to debug your function, it would be very, very tedious and time-consuming and problematic if you didn't have this very useful tool. So I'll now revert back to the slideshow. We can also now see where every element, we can now also see every element where a function is used. In the past, we've had the ability to see the nodes that call functions, but now we can see other functions that use the function, and we can see if a function is used in, say, the annual accounting or the resource assessment systems. So you see up here, we've got another icon, show all function and variable usages. Just there. So we do that. So in this particular case, we can see that the function over here on the left, All Today New South Wales, is used by all of these other functions. And over here in another window, we see that function 2 is used by the Victorian Resource Assessment System, which is what this icon here refers to. You can see that that makes sense because it's under the folder Victorian Resource. So you can see here we've got two new tools for helping us to track and manage functions and understand where they're used and understand our model. We can also use the filter up here to filter items shown in the tree. So, for example, you can use it to find unused functions and variables. You can also use it to not show model variables if you don't want to clutter up your display too much, and so on. You can see the choices there. So if you have filtered the unused variables and functions, you can then just delete them all by pressing the cross and clean up your function manager. So just a little bit about time of evaluation now. Time of evaluation can be specified for model variables and for functions. So with model variables, you can specify an individual time of evaluation, or you can set it to use the function time of evaluation. Now there is a little bit of a trick here. So for example, if you specify a model variable to evaluate in the flow phase, and then the function which calls it also evaluates in the flow phase, they don't necessarily evaluate at the same time. If you want the model variable to evaluate when the function evaluates, you should set it to use function time of evaluation. Because if you specify the model variable to evaluate in the flow phase, it will evaluate at the start of the flow phase, but the function may require the model variable to be evaluated partway through the flow phase. So that's a little bit of a trick to be aware of. Juanita referenced earlier some of the time where you need to evaluate functions at the end of a time step, or at the start of a time step. So, for example, if you're trying to set up something which is needed within the time step, you must evaluate at the start of the time step. If you need the results of the time step, then clearly you need to evaluate at the end of the time step. And I'll just say a little bit about date ranges. You'll see up on the, I've lost my cursor, up here there's a date ranges tab beside the functions. There are a heap of predefined date ranges that you can use: previous 30 days, last calendar year, last week, last month. So those are all predefined. The one shown here is the last 365 days, and you can see how that's defined over here. Using a similar method, you can actually define your own date ranges. So up on the top left, you can see where you can add a new date range, and you can add the new date ranges either for the previous complete year or for part of the current year, and define your own ranges. So it's a very powerful management tool within functions. Thank you for listening to this webinar, and are there any questions? Okay. I'll now hand over to Meryl to talk about some future eWater events.
So this webinar is an introduction to a course that we're running in July. It's the Creating a Water Planning Systems course, and it's a great introduction to source concepts and functionality. Training courses are also a great opportunity to talk to eWater hydrologists about your own ideas for source application projects, and some people even bring source projects to work through with the trainers. So here are some other upcoming courses. Please get in contact with me, Meryl McKerrow. I'm the Customer Care Manager, and I can help you if you need assistance determining which courses are most suitable for you. And more descriptions are available on our website. Our other big event is Source 2016. Our Source workshop, it's coming up next month. I'm really looking forward to actually meeting some of you in real life. We'll be hearing from our major Australian jurisdictions on where their source model implementation is up to, and also papers from the rest of the source modelling community. There's still time to register, and if you could please do that as soon as possible, we'll have an idea of numbers. And you can also submit your abstracts. We'll be able to confirm the program then and distribute it out to you. I'm available anytime if you'd like to talk through your ideas for a presentation or discussion, and just contact support@ewater.org.au and I'll get in touch. Otherwise, I'm looking forward to seeing you there. As there aren't any questions at the moment, we might wrap the webinar up there, but if you think of any later, just once again, contact support@ewater.org.au and we'll endeavour to get back to you. Thank you.